and welcome to the Steps to Happiness show on Soul Livity TV. I'm your host, Teresa Greco, happiness coach, author, editor, writer, educator, and Reiki master. Are you ready to follow your joy and tap into your inner happiness? Then the Steps to Happiness show is for you. On my show, my guests and I explore the latest physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well being practices that can help lead you back to the happiness within you. The happiness principle for today's show is overcoming adversity to realize our greatness. One of life's most potent forces is adversity. It has the power to bring out the best in us if we let it. How will you deal with adversity? Will they be roadblocks or springboards? Will adversity cause you to shift your attention from becoming better to becoming bitter? Will you be able to see adversity inflicted losses as actual gifts that give you the chance to reaffirm your dedication to what you want to achieve? Going through challenges like losing your job, getting a divorce, having an addiction, or suffering with a disease are difficult. What can get us through is seeing the challenge as preparation for what's next. These things that we see as tragic, and oftentimes are opportunities disguised as tragedy. And while tragedy can occur, we are spiritually powerful enough to create an opportunity for awareness, for healing for ourselves and others. I can tell you that everything I've experienced thus far that has been painful has been useful, not only in my work and relationships, but in all areas of my life. Everything negative that has happened to me has become a part of me and has helped me to become the person I am today. Life is not always fair, nor is it always easy. We all know that to be true, where we can find ourselves saying, I didn't sign up for this, and feeling resentful, cynicism, and despair. We live in a world that tells us there's a pill for every pain, a diversion for every moment of boredom, and a fix for every problem. But the truth is, there are times when life can feel like hell. As life throws those hardballs, it serves us better to say, I'm going to take this wound and grow from this wound by finding the strength inside me to place one foot in front of the other and taking one step at a time. And when we've faltered, these are the times we need to practice self-compassion and not self-criticism. Not beating ourselves up by recognizing we are a work in progress and we're doing the very best we can today with the knowledge we have at this time. Accepting the situation and standing in our sorrow, in the brokenness, while having a deep faith and a work ethic that says, I can come out of this. By not beating yourself up and not pressuring yourself to do it in a certain amount of time, but working on it every day, one day at a time, one breath at a time. For just beyond our deepest, most terrifying emptiness is a fullness, and just beyond our brokenness is a wholeness. And in those moments of challenge, while we're standing in the ashes of our crumbled life, opportunity lies in the questions, what will I create with the rest of my life? And how do I turn this horrific sorrow into an expression of love? And every moment is the opportunity to start again, taking everything we've learned from the situation and using it as a building block from which we can rebuild our lives. We can decide that throwing in the towel on ourselves is never an option. Remembering that within us is a light that can dispel any darkness and an energy that can create something from nothing. We always have what it takes within us to rise like a phoenix from the ashes. With that being said, I'd like to introduce my first guest. He's the host of the popular University of Adversity podcast and the author of Mastering Adversity. Lance Essihos, hello and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Grateful to be here. I'm excited.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Why don't we start off by you telling us a little bit about why you founded a podcast about adversity?
Yeah, it's a bit of a story. I lost my younger brother to suicide and my dad to cancer within just over a year. And that was kind of the point at which I knew I had to change my life. And prior to that, I was working in the bar and restaurant industry. I was an athlete. I was playing hockey. And I went through a ton of different adversities in all different areas of my life that led me to where I was at that point. Just like everybody, we all have a story, we all go through things. You know, the levels that I went through and the different things that I learned, served me in a lot of ways. But what really what really allowed me to want to make a new decision and change direction was, losing my dad and my brother. I got out of the bar industry, and I just had an inner knowing that I wanted to do something that was more fulfilling and that actually, you know, was more connected to my soul and something more to my truth. I knew that working in the bar industry for many years wasn't serving me, and I put myself through a lot of pain. um and I guess the final straw was losing people so close to me. And I guess the word adversity was something that really stuck with me, and it's kind of become the thing. And you know creating University of Adversity podcast has allowed me to be able to not only share my own story, but have others open up and share theirs as well, which is really, I had no idea was going to be the biggest healing tool in my life.
Mhm.
And it's kind of evolved into this thing where, we all face obstacles, struggles, adversity, whatever you want to label it as. But
Mhm.
how do you look at it and how do you move through it? And it's been fascinating to me learning that, and, kind of learning from the best, learning from
Mhm.
what makes people successful, what makes people push through, what makes people quit. And yeah, it's been a journey ever since, and it's
Mhm.
just continuing to grow. And yeah, that's what's kind of brought me where I am today.
Mhm. So, my show is so much about connecting with and nurturing all aspects of ourselves, our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual selves. And with with connecting with your spiritual self, I believe comes the belief that we are whole, healed, and complete, just as we are, and that from if as souls we are having a spiritual existence in a human body. So we've come down to have this human playground that we interact with and we have these experiences, is that our soul comes down here to learn, grow, and expand. That is its purpose. And it's doing that all the time. And so in on this human playground, we encounter, as you said, challenges and adversity and hoops that we have to jump through and hardships and all of this. In that those are opportunities for us to learn, grow, and expand. And that when we look at it as life is not happening to us, but it's happening for us and happening through us at the same time. And so that changes the perspective from understanding, oh, if this is happening for me, why would that be? And what am I supposed to learn from this situation that's occurring? And that also knowing that if you are whole, healed, and complete, you have what it takes inside of you to overcome any situation that is put on our path. And so if we believe that we can overcome anything and that what we are given is something that we can get through, then I believe that we can see the adversity from an angle of opportunity and versus an angle of us feeling like we're victims all the time, that life is happening to us. What would you
Yeah,
say?
I mean, yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's all perspective. Like
Hmm.
if you see the opportunity in the chaos, you know, then you can't lose because you always see the opportunity to learn and grow. Because we all know those people that no matter what happens, they'll always see the glass being half empty rather than half full. And I really believe that in my own life, it's that general optimism for life that really is important. And I've seen it with people that live a long time too. People in their 90s and like in their hundreds, they have this playfulness about them that, oh, it's just something to get through. Like this, there's all these challenges, they're all going to come at us, but how do you want to look at it? Like you have a choice. Like you said, either be the victim of your story or get empowered and learn and grow. So that's what I'm learning, and I could only speak for myself, but that's the way I used to be. Is I used to be the victim. I used to look at, and that was the way I was raised. It's not anybody's fault. That was just kind of like the way things were done. It's like poor me. That person has that. Oh, they must be whatever. It's just like this like victim mentality, and it just doesn't do anything for anybody. And in the world we're living in right now, you see it all the time, and it's like
Hmm.
you just take your power away. Like
Hmm.
there's a lack of ownership in our lives for what's going on. Yeah, it sucks some of the situations, but how are you going to deal with it? Like, what are you going to do? And
Hmm.
I really believe that a lot of people just get stuck in the story of victimhood and it doesn't serve. And you're going to keep learning that over and over again until you realize that
Hmm.
you have more control than you think. You can't control what
Hmm.
happens to you, but you can control how you react. And that is just such an important thing to realize in life,
Hmm.
especially right now with what's going on.
I agree. And so my next question, so you having, interviewed so many people from different walks of life with different types of, having faced different types of adversity, in what ways would you say that adversity affects our lives, both like the
Hmm.
positive and negative, through all the stories you've heard?
Well, whenever we achieve anything, we don't talk about the thing we achieved. We talk about how do we get there. It's always like that. So it's how we teach people, it's how we relate to people. Oh, I bought a mansion. Oh, amazing. Like, oh, I don't care. How did you get to it? I overcame this. Oh, really? Now I'm
Mhm.
listening. Like, that's where it's important. So it's almost like we have to overcome something to get something. Otherwise, what is the point? Right? So that is valuable in the story that we want to tell, and which creates fulfillment. And I guess
Mhm.
how it can be challenging in our life is, well, nobody likes to get inconvenienced with some sort of uncomfortable
Mhm.
challenge, adversity, right? I mean, of course, we all want to live this smooth sailing life, but I guess that is it too, is sometimes it can throw a wrench in our plans. And I think when people are
Mhm.
trying to manifest and create success, they try and control the how so much and it ends up, messing up their thoughts because they think it's supposed to be a
Mhm.
certain way. But I guess it's the fact that when it shows up, it's like how long do you dwell on it before you just take action?
Mhm.
You may
Mhm.
fall off the path, and we all fall off the path. But how long do you stay off the path before you come on the path to back onto
Mhm.
track? And I think that is really that is it. So I see it as a positive thing. I see adversity as essential.
Mhm.
It's almost like a game. The most successful people that I've talked to, they see it as a game. They see it as a dance. Like, oh, okay, how am I going to work around this? It's fun
Mhm.
for them rather than, oh no, I'm stuck. What do I do? Like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
this is stuck, but let's get through. Let's move it. And if it's going to stop you, feel it, understand, like, this is happening. All right, that it's not ideal, but how are we going to move through it? So I
Mhm.
think that it really, really affects us because we don't go through anything. We don't have anything to talk about or teach anybody or inspire anybody with. And in order for people to take action to step over the line to do anything, they need to be inspired. They need inspired action. Otherwise, all this knowledge and personal development means nothing if somebody doesn't
Mhm.
actually take action. But when you're teaching people and trying to help people, people connect to that story of overcoming things. At least for
Mhm.
me, that's what I needed. I was like, well, if they did it, I can do it. So it's essential in
Mhm.
our growth as humans and sharing. I've made it up here. Now I want to help you have perspective, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's super, super valuable. But it's an inconvenience for people at times, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm,
I agree with all of that. It's because we attribute meaning to the failures and the hardship. We
mhm,
say it's good or bad. It's hard, it's not so bad. It's not so hard. That this is like brutal. I can't make it. And then so it's that if we just went through life as the observer to say, "Oh, that happened to me." Oh well. Oh, well,
mhm,
without like putting all this meaning on it, right? That then, like you said, creates a bit of a drama around it too. And then we throw our perspective on top of it. But if our perspective was always like, oh, whatever, it's like a roadblock. So let as you kind of alluded to, like playing a game of life. That as these roadblocks come in, it's like, okay, how am I going to get around this? Right? That it's not that all of a sudden we're like, oh, we're such losers, we'll never amount to anything. I'm gonna sit here and die in the game. It's like, no, no, okay. Let me think of like everything that, like all my resourcefulness, everything I know, everything that I am, and then to try to overcome the situation without, like I said, attributing all this meaning to it too. And so if I think that, as you said, some people actually feel energized by it, it's because they're not attributing this awful meaning about themselves too, right? That it's always about
mhm,
us. And that if we don't think positively, if we're not thinking positively about ourselves, we're not loving ourselves the way that we need to, then we start to say negative things to ourselves. And I would say like a victim of that, where I said terrible things to myself every time I looked at the mirror. I wasn't enough of a lot of different things. And they were all things that other people had said to me, but then I inherited them and adopted them as part of the negative self-talk that I said to myself. And so I think that if we didn't do that with the challenges, then we'd be able to pick ourselves up quicker, as you said, and jump into that massive action to be able to overcome it without wallowing in it so much.
mhm. Yeah, I agree. And it's almost like we need to have a fresh, clean slate all the
Mhm.
time because the levels of attachment we have to past stories and past
Mhm.
situations dictate how we look at the adversity in front of us, right? So if something similar happened to you in the past, well, you're going to look at it and think the same thing is going to happen. But that's the challenge. It's like giving life a fresh canvas every day,
Mhm.
which comes from doing a lot of work, trauma work and everything. But that's really what yesterday doesn't exist. All that exists is a story, an attachment to an idea, and an emotion that you're bringing into the present moment, right?
Mhm.
That's really what it is. And it's your level of attachment to that thing, whatever it may be,
Mhm.
that you're literally basing your present moment and whatever is going on in front of you on
Mhm.
that. And it's really interesting because it's not even true. Like a lot
Mhm.
of it is just a story.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's interesting because also what how you look at a situation is sometimes just how you're feeling that day. Did you do the things that you do normally? Do you have a morning routine? How are you eating? You drink water. How you feel and your emotional state really
Mhm.
impacts how you face a challenge,
Mhm.
adversity. Like I've seen it in my own life. If I don't take care of my body, I don't sleep. Well, the adversity is going to seem like a nightmare because my
Mhm.
brain is like emotionally I'm unstable. I can't think straight. You know, there's all these factors that determine how we face something, right? And if we do all the
Mhm.
things we know work, our mind, body, spirit is kind of
Mhm.
aligned, and
Mhm.
no matter what it is, it's not as hard
Mhm.
as it would be if weren't doing those things. So
Mhm.
yeah,
And and it's putting that first, right? That instead of putting us on the back burner all the time, is saying that how can I be a light in the darkness if I'm not the light myself? That if I'm
totally.
running on
Yeah.
empty all the time and I'm not making time to nurture all those aspects of ourselves and to really come into alignment with who we are in all aspects. As you said, if we can't ignore any of that, that if emotionally we're not feeling the best, then it's important that we also nurture the physical part of us and the mental part of us too, by reading the books that we like, listening to the podcasts that we like to listen to, watching the shows, like whatever it is that then nourishes like all parts of ourselves, so that then, I like I said, we can fall into alignment. So I would love to go into some of the steps that you've created that you believe can help someone to master the adversity in their life.
Yeah, so I was thinking about it when I was writing to kind of break down what it actually looks like to work through adversity, right? So, first is awareness. Like awareness is the first step to any change. You have to be aware that something is going on, right? So, once you're aware, then you can at least start to, move forward, make the changes, or at least know that you need to make the changes. Um, Second is acceptance. Is that
Mhm.
acceptance doesn't mean, oh, I accept this and it's never gonna, this is it. It's like, well, no, it's like, all right, I'm aware. I accept that this is who I am. This is my story. But, you know, I am, I'm able to be comfortable with who I am, essentially, right? Because if you aren't able to accept who you are, then you're never going to be able to move forward.
Mhm.
The good, the bad, the ugly. And a lot of people, this is what happens in a lot of the personal development. People try to positive attitude themselves out of
Mhm.
stuff. They need to do shadow work. They need to do the trauma work. It's important because
Mhm.
it's when you deny any of the dark, you're denying part of yourself. So
Mhm. Mhm.
so comfortable, but when you can accept all of you as just as important as the good, or the good, the
Mhm.
bad, it's just a label, right? But when you can
Yes.
accept all of it, the stuff you may not be the most proud of, the ugly stuff, like that is what's real self love. That is
Mhm.
loving yourself, not just loving the achievements, but loving like the scared little boy or girl, the crazy stuff that you did, the things you said, the people you hurt. It's all part of your journey, and you got to learn to love it and accept it. Because if you
Mhm.
can't, it's hard to move forward.
So I have one last
Mhm.
question for you today. Why is it important for us to do the work? As you said, if we have to do the shadow work, we have to do the inner exploration. Why?
Well, I guess we just need to ask, like, why are you here? Why are we here? Right?
Mm.
I mean, do you want to live your true purpose? Do you want to really fully live the most purposeful life that you possibly can? Connect to your truest essence, your soul, your intuition? Then in order to
Mhm.
do that, we need to do the things that block us from that. And a lot of it is trauma. A lot of it is healing stories and healing
Mhm.
this, that, other thing. But it's being, first of all, like we said, it's being aware that there's something there. And if you're destined for greatness and you're destined to serve others and live a fulfilling life, well, then it's essential to do the work, because then you'll be able to tap into your truest,
Mhm.
purest self. And the more you work through this stuff, the better you get, and the clearer you get, the louder the whispers
Mhm.
get from your intuition. Um, and you just start to get better at navigating like your truth. And I think it's essential at doing that. And that's what life is all about, right? It's about growing and learning. And I think just being a humble student of life is very important,
Mhm.
to learn from people. And we can learn from the homeless guy, we can learn from the billionaire. Everybody's a teacher.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think if we can really see things like that and always be open to learning and growing, um, then
Mhm.
life will get better for all of us. And I think it's essential if we really, really want to, get to our true potential in life. So,
Mhm. I agree. I agree. I think it's true that in order to realize who we're supposed to be and who we're supposed to become in our lifetime, it's to do all of the things that you just said. Love that. Thank you so much, Lance, for being on the show today and speaking to us more about mastering adversity in our lives.
thank you. This is awesome. That went by so quick.
I know I could talk to you way longer because there's so much more I wanted to ask, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay tuned as after the break, I'll be speaking with Kimberly about the ways we can overcome trauma in our lives.
Life is full of moments. And when sickness breaks your momentum, from the 5 a.m. stomach bug or stress and anxiety at work, don't forget you have Teladoc. Great care options by phone, video, or app. 24/7 access to doctors. And access to therapists 7 days a week. From anywhere you are. Day or night. Whatever it is, we're always ready to help. So you can get back to enjoying life's best moments faster. Life is good. Enjoy it well.
Visit a doctor today without even leaving your home. For as little as $19.95 per month for a family plan, you get access to board-certified physicians as often as you need it. And there's $0 for medical visits anytime, anywhere. Register now by visiting solivity.com/health perks. That's solivity.com/health perks.
Solivity Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing want to remind you about the importance of continuing to follow public health guidelines to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Please continue to wear a mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. Please visit these sites for further information about how to stay safe from COVID-19 into the new year. Remember, love protects us.
We work so hard sometimes. Isn't it time for a break? Take a walk or enjoy nature, or maybe a leap or a ride, or even a dip. Spending time with a friend or some time alone. Whatever it is, always spend time growing and learning with a Solivity Weekend. Every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on Solivity TV.
I'm excited to introduce my next guest. She's an author, life coach specializing in trauma, and an entrepreneur. Kimberly Walters, hello and welcome to the show.
Hello, Teresa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Kimberly, why don't we start off by you telling us how you ended up becoming a trauma coach?
Okay. Well, I like to joke and say, well, trauma coach got me. So prior to becoming a trauma coach, I worked in corporate America, and aspiring to climb the corporate ladder. I was the administrative assistant and EAP coordinator for the director of mental health for a Fortune 500 company. I also partnered with the Learning and Organizational Development Department, speaking about self care in the workplace, adversity, and adaptability, not knowing that I was struggling with mental illness. Prior to working in corporate, I grew up in the foster care system. I went from house to house. I was I experienced rape, I was emotionally abused, physically abused, and I was raped, which prompted me to struggle with suicidal behavior and suicidal ideation since I was the age of 10. Um, and so a lot of that I kind of just stuffed and tucked. Did my best to stuff and tuck all of the bad memories by putting my energy into going to college, into becoming educated, working in corporate, climbing the corporate ladder, until finally I it came to a point to where I found myself on my office floor having an episode. um, the suicidal thoughts, the coping strategies that I used to use to manage the suicidal thoughts and behaviors no longer work. The suicidal thoughts manifested into becoming homicidal thoughts, and that is what scared me. That is what scared me to actually ask for help versus trying to manage it on my own. And when I asked for help, well, when I asked for help, my boss actually walked in my office and asked me what was going on. Why did I have my door shut? Because we had an open door policy. Um, and I told her that I didn't know what was going on. I wrote down my thoughts on a sticky note, and she looked and she read them and she said, well, let me get you a doctor. I have a nice doctor you can go to right now. And so I just quickly went off to the doctor's office, and by then I was experiencing tearfulness. I was crying for like 3 hours straight, not knowing what was going on. And but my fiance is great. My children are it's great. They're great, and I'm living a nice life. Um, we're real estate investors, so we have property. We have all these things. But yet here I am in the doctor's office experiencing tearfulness, and everyone in the office, all of the workers, they're just like, "Oh my gosh, do you know who that is?" And it's the person that's teaching them about self care.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
And so when I walked out of the doctor's office, I walked out of his office with a bag full of medicine. Although I conveyed to him that my parents are addicts and I really didn't want to have anything to do with medicine. And he said, "Well, just hold on to it just in case." And my fiance is a psychiatric nurse, so he looked at all of the symptoms that the medication could cause and was just like, "No, you're not using these drugs. Let's look for some help. Let's look for a psychotherapist that specializes in trauma." And so that is exactly what we did. I found someone here in Western Massachusetts that specialized in trauma. And for the first 6 months, we did talk therapy. And I noticed that, okay, I feel better. because I'm finally able to tell someone what happened to me growing up in foster care system. But I no longer had the homicidal thoughts, but I still had the suicidal thoughts, and they were more intense than ever before. So that is when I decided to do my own research, go to school, and actually learn how to do this for myself. And so my first year in clinical studies, I had residency, and I was able to work with various different doctors and their different approaches, and I was able to study and learn with them. And then working with them and studying on my own, I was able to research different holistic practices, use those skills on myself, along with talk therapy, and recover and beat PTSD, depression, and anxiety naturally.
And so then that led you to decide that you wanted to help others who are facing some of the same challenges.
Yes. And so that's when I decided to work as a mental health counselor as a way of giving back. It was a step down, step down in pay, um, from what I was used to, but at the same time it felt fulfilling because I was able to teach someone these skills that helped me, even though it wasn't, working as a mental health counselor for the state, you're working with low income people. And so it wasn't about their income, it was more of their ability to learn the different skills
Mm.
and their willingness to learn them. So I felt like I was making a difference because I was there, but then I felt like my hands was tied behind my backs because these were people that really didn't want to learn what I was teaching them in the
Mhm.
moment. So then that is why I became a trauma coach. It's because I'm able to attract people who actually want to learn how to heal and put in the work that it takes to change the trajectory of their lives.
Mm. Kimberly, do you think that we can be truly happy if we have those skeletons in our closet that we're, trying to shove in there or under the rug? Do you think that it's inevitable that we might get to a point that we actually have to look at those skeletons, that even though we might try to move past that, in order for us to really live our happiest lives and ultimately the greatness of who we are, do you think that adversity and our past trauma needs to get looked at based on your own personal experience of, the life that you were living before and the life that you're living now after all the work that you've done to come to the place that you're at now? Is it important for us to look at those skeletons?
I definitely think that it is important for us to look at those skeletons. There's an old saying, if you don't deal with trauma, it will deal with you. And that is certainly true. And that's what I practice. That's what I preach. I just don't want anyone to experience the far end of the spectrum before they reach out for help.
Mhm, mhm. And you were at that point with you being, wanting to end your own life and also taking action on those around you. So it can get to that point. And so it's beautiful that you've decided to be so vulnerable to share your own personal challenges, which I really thank you for doing that on the show today, because you're so courageous and brave to do that. But then going forward to try to make an impact on the lives of the others so that they also don't need to get to that point. And I also really wanted you to be on the show today because you developed a holistic approach to be able to not take the prescription drugs I to put the band-aids, let's say, maybe on the symptoms, but rather to get to the root cause of the symptoms that you're feeling, to deal with those so that you're not stuffing and tucking, as you're saying, but actually releasing them, letting them go, healing from them, forgiving, you and yourself and others in the process. So you've developed an 8-phase program that's assisting people from healing from their trauma, from their adversity, So if you could maybe tell us a little bit about the phases in your program.
Okay. So the two-part program that I created, the first part is for the individual to process their trauma, process what happened to them. And so it's kind of basically talk therapy style for the first hour. And then the second hour, that's when I teach you the skills. So I teach you the skills and then I provide you with a homework assignment shortly after. So for the first phase, you're to learn the foundations of trauma, resilience, and how to leverage the law of attraction to manifest well being. The second is write and rewrite your trauma narrative. So that's when we're going to go back to your childhood and dig up all of those skeletons in the closet, and we're going to face them. We are no longer going to hide them or stuff and tuck. Um, the third phase, we're going to build a loving self connection practice with ourselves. Fourth phase, we're going to learn the power of our subconscious mind. In the fifth phase, we're going to instill boundaries for peace of mind. In the sixth phase, we are going to guide our self love with meditation. So, doing some inner child healing work. The seventh phase, we're going to learn how to identify direction from within by connecting with our intuition. In the eighth phase, we're going to create your personal purpose driven roadmap so that you can connect with your purpose and impact others, have a positive impact on others.
And live our greatest lives and live the greatness that we are, and in the
Mhm.
life that we wanted to lead when we came down here to have this earthly experience. So I just before we go into the details of phase two of your program, is that it can be scary to the thought of looking at the skeletons, to go back and in time to deal with those traumatic experiences that happened to us, and which I can understand is like that fear can hold us back from wanting to do that. But when we're connecting to our spiritual self in the process of it, we understand that we're being loved and supported in the process. And that when we go back to look at the trauma, we're not alone. That working with a practitioner like yourself, or working with the doctors that you worked with, and knowing that on a spiritual level you're supported by what I call your divine crew, that there's a whole host of people that are cradling you, wrapping their wings around you, um, and loving you in the process, that the healing um, doesn't feel as scary. And I know that you integrate that aspect into your coaching practice, the understanding and the feeling that you're not doing it alone, that you're being supported along the way, so that you have the that support that you need to actually to look at the skeletons and not flee from them, because it's hard to do so. So I know that in this first phase, you help people to deal with that emotional response that can creep up, that you experienced that day on the floor in your office. So please talk to us about that phase two and what we basically need to work with.
Okay, so in phase two, the first exercise that we're going to learn how to do is regulate your nervous system. So there's four steps in learning how to regulate your nervous system that I find to be like a quick go-to. Just to share a little bit with you, before I learned how to regulate my nervous system, I would go through the fight, flight, freeze, and that's your trauma response system. And I would get so scared to where I would call the police because I didn't know how to regulate my nervous system. I would just call the police and ask them for help, and they'll show up to my house and, be wondering, like, what is going on. So I went from calling the police because I didn't know how to manage my nervous system to pausing, taking that pause after I become triggered, take a deep breath. And you can take deep breaths as long as you need to calm your nervous system. And then after you take that deep breath, you observe your sensations. Observe your sensations, identify sensing into your body to see, okay, what exactly am I feeling at the moment? And then after you sense into your body, then you think of a resource. That a resource could be a person, place, thing, or idea that brings about positive sensations. For me, it was my children. So I would have a picture of my children in my purse or on myself, and I will pull out my picture of my children and think about them and think about their smile and look at their face and see how beautiful they are, and I would become happy. So bringing myself to a joyous state of being, and then reinforcing that happiness with gratitude, expressing gratitude in the moment. I am so happy and grateful for my children. I'm so happy and grateful for my family. And just excuse me. Yes. So that is, and then just doing that every time I was triggered, and what it created was just an automatic response. So when I did become triggered, it's like over years, it no longer became a process; it became automatic.
Mhm. So initially it might take someone, how many minutes do you think to go through those steps to start to regulate the nervous system? Because when we're in that fight or flight mode, we can't make sense of
Mhm.
anything really, that we're not operating under, from the frontal lobe of our brain, but rather like the hindbrain, which is that part that doesn't doesn't make any sense, and we're basically in like survival mode at that point. And so when we're there, we need to really move through the steps that you just talked about so that we can start to make sense of what's happening. And so it also, I think, speaks to, the fact that you just immediately, I mean, calling for help, I think, was probably a great response in your case when you called the police, when you weren't, rational in that moment, but you knew enough to like to call for help, which was great. So initially, how many minutes do you think it might take to start to get from that place of like fight or flight to that place of gratitude?
I think it really depends on the individual and how far along they are on that spectrum. For me, it took months. I mean, I had to call on my therapist. I had to call on my director, who's a licensed mental health therapist, for them to actually walk me through the steps while on the phone with me. So,
Mhm.
and that was because I was on the far end of the spectrum. My clients, oh my gosh, they tran learn this in what, an hour or so, and the next day they're putting these steps into practice and then teaching their children and their family members. So it really depends on how far you are on the spectrum.
Mhm.
It can take months, it can take years, or it can take days, like my clients.
Mhm. Mhm. And I'm an educator by profession, and I think that the steps that you just went through also make sense for them as well. That something's happened on the playground, or they fought with a fellow student or something like that, and it's hard to rationalize with someone that's super angry in the moment and they're in that defense mode. That to be able to do those steps could absolutely be able to settle someone down so that you can get to a place where they can be rational about their thought process and take control of their breathing. So once they've mastered that physical part, what is the next part of this phase?
Okay, so the next part of the phase is for them to actually come come to get those skeletons out of their closets. That's the next step.
Mm.
And we do that with exposure therapy, by them writing out their trauma narrative. And I use Eric Erickson's stages of development. And so he break down the different stages. It's like 8 different stages. And so what we do, we start with the first phase. First, so there's a process. We write out they're going to write out the trauma. First, we're going in that session, they're going to talk about it, what happened to them. And then they're going to go home, write it out in detail, not only the bad, but also the good. We're going to bridge the bad and the good. We're not going to just focus on the bad. So then they write out the bad and the good, what happened to them in the traumatic event. And then they're going to bring that assignment back to session. And so they're going to talk about it. And then they're going to read to me what they wrote down on the paper, allow themselves to utilize their 4-step system, because this usually emotional, brings up a lot of emotions. So they're going to utilize their 4-step system in the moment. And then after they read it to me, and then we process it together. And so
And why
that's
is
that's
why?
stage 2.
Mhm. And then that helps to do the rewriting afterwards.
Yes, it helps with desensitizing from the trauma.
Mm.
So this is a process, like with that one traumatic event, you can do the same process with other events, or with that same event. If you haven't desensitized from it to where you can't tell your story without crying or bringing up emotion, you can go through this process over and over again until you actually desensitize from the traumatic event.
Mm.
And so after writing out their trauma, we do a rewriting of their narrative. So we analyze their current state. So I give them a current self worksheet so that they can fill in the current self worksheet. Where are they now? And just be honest with themselves. And then I provide them with a next level self worksheet. What values do you want to embody? What care what how do you see yourself? Like, okay, you see yourself now, but how how what's your dream? Like, what do you think your next level self, um how do you see yourself how do you see your next level self, basically? And then I provide them with a worksheet so that they can go ahead and fill out that worksheet and create a new identity for themselves. And then together, as we go through the program, then we can analyze where they are in the moment, and bridge the gap to becoming their next level self.
Is it also able to see the progress that you've made and the steps that you've made that have brought you to who you are today in that
Yes,
rewriting process?
yes, it does.
Mhm. And so after that, then what do they move into?
Then they move into tracking their triggers. And so with this, I created an Excel worksheet so they can go into the Excel worksheet, and everything is like colorized, the different sensations in the body that they feel. They can put a color to it, whatever color that they want to put to that emotion. And when they become triggered, they're to first go back and see, okay, what was the first 5 things that I did that led up to me becoming triggered? And what were the 5 things that I did after becoming triggered? And they're to note the place where they were, observe their area. Like, was it a smell that triggered them? Was it, ask themselves? I provide them with questions within the template so that they can ask themselves and sit and observe their thoughts, to note what comes up for them, and figuring out what triggered them in the moment.
Mhm, mhm. And then there's a last part?
Then there's a last part. It's called crush your CDs. Crush your CDs and create your evidence file. Crushing your CDs. CD stands for cognitive distortion. I call it CDs because whenever I say we're going to talk about cognitive distortions today, everyone's like, "Oh, I don't have those. I don't have any cognitive distortions." So we all have cognitive distortions. So for it to not just sound so frightening and threatening, I call it CDs. And so what we do, so I pull from Dr. Burns' book. It's called Feeling Good. He is one of the founders of cognitive cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and he talks a lot about cognitive distortions and how cognitive distortions going untreated can lead to negative thought processes, negative behavior, and experiencing negative emotions and acting on them. And so I briefly, via PowerPoint and Zoom, we go over what these top 12 cognitive distortions are, the benefit of you learning how to change your thought processes with that particular cognitive distortion. And then I provide you with the steps, a small practice on how to navigate that cognitive distortion so that you can bring yourself from a state of bring yourself from a low or high zone back to your resilient zone, experiencing more happiness and joy.
If people want to find out more about you and your program, how can they do that?
Okay, so you can go to my website, kimberlywalters.co, and you can connect with me on Instagram at kimberlywalters.traumacoach.
Thank you again for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Teresa. Such a blessing.
I'm going to leave you with a thought for the day. People's reactions to adversity are varied, including the common response to misfortune, which is to try to make it go away. The truth is that removing hardship also removes one of the most fundamental components for greatness. The belief that the world is unfair and we have little control over it creates a victim mentality, which averts us from feeling that we have what it takes to overcome any challenging situation that befalls us. When adversity is avoided or circumvented, the deep roots of character, learning, resilience, creativity, and determination are not allowed to grow. Adversity is a necessary component of growth and progress. Rather than avoiding difficulties, we should embrace it. We're not going to like it or enjoy it. We're going to have some discomfort, but that's how we know we're stretching past our comfort zone. We must trust in the role adversity plays in our lives by transforming a raging storm into a true source of power and strength. By embracing and being grateful for the learning and growing our challenges provide us with, we are able to move that much closer towards our greatness. Thank you for joining me today on the Steps to Happiness show, and I look forward to being here with you again next week.
To connect with Teresa Greco after the show for coaching, workshops, and speaking engagements, you can visit her website at teresagreco.ca or by email at stepstotruehappiness@gmail.com or follow her on Instagram at TeresaGreco_Steps to Happiness or on Facebook at Steps to True Happiness with Teresa Greco.